It was raining so hard that night, she almost didn't stop. But when Mia saw a man lying unconscious beside a wrecked car, her heart wouldn't let her walk away. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story. But that one moment of kindness was about to change her entire life. Because the man she saved wasn't just anyone. He was a billionaire who would soon change her destiny forever. It was raining so hard that night that even the streetlights looked like faint smudges of gold through the storm. The wind howled through the narrow streets of the city, chasing umbrellas, rattling windows, and soaking everything in its path. Mia clutched her worn-out umbrella tightly, though it was barely holding up against the furious rain. Her shoes were soaked, her hands were freezing, and her thin jacket offered little warmth. But she kept walking fast, her small bag pressed tightly against her chest. She had just finished her late shift at the cafe, a quiet little place tucked between two tall buildings, and she was exhausted. The cafe's pay wasn't much, barely enough to cover rent and groceries. In her wallet, she had only $10 left, and even that had to last until next week. But despite her struggles, Mia wasn't bitter. She was the kind of girl who smiled at strangers, who shared her umbrella with children, who still believed that better days were coming. She carried hope in her heart, even when her pockets were empty. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, she whispered to herself, "Just get home, Mia. Hot tea, dry socks, and sleep. That's all you need." She turned onto a quieter street, one she often used as a shortcut. The rain seemed even heavier there, and the only sound was the rhythmic splash of water under her feet. Then, suddenly, she froze. At the far end of the street, a car had crashed into a light pole. Its headlights flickered weakly, cutting through the rain. The driver's door was open, and through the pouring water, Mia saw a man lying motionless on the ground. Her heart skipped. Without thinking, she ran toward him. Say, are you okay?" she shouted, kneeling beside him. The man didn't answer right away. His hair was soaked, his suit, clearly expensive, was drenched and torn near his shoulder. A thin trail of blood mixed with rainwater ran down his hand. "Say, can you hear me?" she said again, panic rising in her voice. He blinked weakly, his lips trembling as if trying to speak. Mia didn't wait for him to respond. She fumbled in her bag, hands shaking, and dialed for an ambulance. "Please hurry," she cried into the phone. "There's been an accident. He's bleeding and unconscious." When she hung up, she noticed he was shivering. Without thinking twice, she pulled off a jacket and draped it over him, shielding him from the cold rain. "Just hold on," she said softly. "Help is coming." The man's eyes flickered open for a second, focusing on her face. His voice was barely a whisper, broken and faint. "Thank you." And then he passed out. Mia stayed beside him, her knees soaking in the puddles, her umbrella long forgotten on the ground. She checked his pulse again and again, making sure he was still breathing. Each second felt like an hour. When the ambulance sirens finally echoed down the street, relief flooded her heart. The paramedics rushed over, placing the man on a stretcher. "Are you his relative?" one of them asked. Mia shook her head. "No, I just found him here." The paramedic nodded. "He's lucky you did." Another 10 minutes, and it could have been Weiss. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Mia felt something heavy in her chest. Not fear, but a strange sense of connection. She didn't know who he was, but something about his face, his fragile state in the rain, made her want to protect him. When the ambulance drove away, its red lights disappearing into the storm, Mia stood there for a moment under the rain, completely drenched. The streets were empty again. She finally picked up her umbrella, now half broken, and whispered to herself, "I hope you'll be okay." Then she turned and began walking home, her wet clothes clinging to her skin, her heart strangely restless. She didn't know that the man she had just saved wasn't just anyone. He wasn't an ordinary stranger. He was Ethan Walker, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country, a man whose name appeared in magazines, whose face was seen on television, and whose life was filled with luxury. But at that moment, he was just a life she had saved. And that act of kindness, born out of nothing but compassion, was about to rewrite her entire future. That rainy night, the night when the thunder roared and the city slept, had quietly marked the beginning of a story that would soon change everything. Because sometimes, destiny doesn't knock on your door. It lies bleeding on a rainy street, waiting for a kind soul to stop and care. The next morning, sunlight peeked through the half-broken blinds of Mia's small apartment. The rain from the night before had stopped, leaving the streets clean and shining. But Mia's mind was still clouded with worry. She couldn't stop thinking about the man she had found on the street, his pale face, the blood on his hand, the weak thank you he had whispered before losing consciousness. She didn't even know his name. After a quick breakfast of tea and leftover bread, she decided to visit the hospital. Just to check, she told herself. I want to know he's okay. At the hospital's front desk, Mia hesitated for a moment before asking, "Excuse me, the man who was in the car accident last night. He was brought here by an ambulance. Do you know which room he's in?" The nurse scrolled through her chart and smiled kindly. "Ah yes, room 502. He's lucky you found him. He had lost quite a bit of blood, but is stable now." Mia's heart relaxed a little. "Thank you," she said softly, walking toward the elevator. As the doors opened and she stepped out on the 5th floor, a strange nervousness crept up inside her. What if he doesn't remember me? She thought. What if I'm disturbing him? But still, her feet moved forward. She gently pushed open the door to room 502. Inside, the man was sitting up in bed, his left arm wrapped in white bandages. His face looked much better in daylight, clean-shaven, fair, and calm, though there was still a hint of tiredness in his eyes. When he turned and saw her, surprise flashed across his face, quickly replaced by a warm smile. "You," he said slowly, as if recognizing something familiar. "You're the girl who helped me." Mia nodded, smiling shyly. "Yes, I just wanted to see if you were okay." He blinked for a moment, then chuckled softly. "Trust me, not everyone would stop in the middle of a thunderstorm for a stranger. You might have just saved my life." Mia looked down, embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same. He shook his head slightly. "No, not everyone would. You're different." There was a short silence. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor filled the room. Then, he said gently, "I'm Ethan, by the way. Ethan Walker." "Mia," she replied with a small smile. "Just Mia." "Nice to meet you, just Mia," he teased lightly, and for the first time, she laughed. They talked for a few minutes, about the rain, the accident, and how she had found him. Ethan listened intently, his eyes warm and grateful. Despite the hospital gown and the machines around him, there was something dignified about him, something that made him seem important, though he never mentioned anything about himself. When Mia stood up to leave, he said, "Wait, I'd like to thank you properly. Can I meet you once I'm out of here?" She smiled, shaking her head. "You don't have to. Really. I'm just glad you're fine." He grinned. "I insist. Let me do something nice for the person who saved my life." Mia laughed lightly. "Fine. But only if it doesn't involve money." Ethan chuckled, holding his side. "Then maybe dinner. You pick the place." Her cheeks turned pink. "We'll see," she said, trying not to smile too widely. As she stepped out of the room, she felt strangely lighter, as if a new kind of warmth had entered her world. She didn't understand why, but the thought of that man's grateful smile stayed in her mind all the way home. What she didn't know was that behind that smile hid a life she couldn't even imagine. The man she had saved wasn't just some businessman or traveler. Ethan Walker was one of the richest and most powerful men in the country, the CEO of Walker Industries, a global company that dominated everything from real estate to technology. His face was often on magazine covers, but Mia had never paid attention to such things. She lived in a different world, one where luxury cars and business headlines didn't exist. To her, he was just a kind man who needed help. But to him, she was the first person who had ever seen him as a person, not a billionaire. When Ethan's personal assistant came to visit later that day, bringing in files and updates, he said quietly, "Sir, the reporters are still asking questions about the accident. Should I make a statement?" Ethan looked out the window, remembering Mia's soft eyes and her soaked jacket as she covered him. "No," he said calmly. "Tell them nothing. For now, this stays private." The assistant nodded and left. Ethan's gaze lingered on the cloudy sky beyond the glass. He didn't know why that simple girl's kindness had touched him so deeply, but something about her felt pure. And for the first time in years, Ethan Walker, the man who had everything, found himself thinking about someone who wanted nothing from him. As he leaned back on his pillow, a faint smile crossed his lips. "Just Mia," he whispered to himself. "I'll see you again soon." A week passed since Mia's visit to the hospital, and life had returned to its usual rhythm, or at least, that's what she thought. Every day, she worked long shifts at the cafe, saving customers with her warm smile, even when her feet ached and her back screamed for rest. The little tips she earned barely covered her bills, but she never complained. Still, every now and then, her mind drifted back to that kind man with kind eyes, Ethan. She wondered if he had truly recovered, and if he ever thought about her again. That evening, the sky was painted with shades of orange as Mia walked home, clutching a small bag of groceries. She turned a corner to her narrow street, and stopped dead in her tracks. A sleek black car, shiny and spotless, was parked outside her tiny apartment building. It looked completely out of place among the old buildings and flickering streetlights. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. Then, the car door opened and a tall man in a black suit stepped out. His posture was straight, his voice calm and respectful. "Miss Mia." She hesitated. "Yes. Mr. Ethan Walker would like to meet you," he said politely. Mia blinked, stunned. "Wait, what? Mr. Ethan Walker, the billionaire?" The man gave a small nod, opening the back door for her. At first, she thought it was some kind of mistake or even a cruel joke. Why would a billionaire want to see her, a girl who barely made enough to survive? But something inside her whispered that it was real. Before she could think too much, she found herself sitting inside the car, surrounded by the smell of leather and quiet luxury. The city lights flickered past as the car moved smoothly through traffic, heading toward the tall glass towers downtown. When they arrived, Mia stepped out, her eyes widening. The building was enormous, polished marble floors, shimmering chandeliers, and people in sharp suits walking briskly with purpose. The receptionist smiled at her. "Mr. Walker is expecting you. Top floor." Her heart pounded as she stepped into the elevator. Each ding as it climbed higher made her pulse faster. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling glass walls, offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The room was filled with elegance, a dark wooden desk, modern art, and soft golden light. And standing there, smiling, was Ethan. He looked completely different from the man she had met in the hospital. His suit was tailored perfectly, his presence commanding, his confidence unshakable. But his eyes, those kind, gentle eyes, were the same. "Mia," he said warmly, walking toward her. "I told you I wanted to thank you." She stood frozen, struggling to find words. You're that Ethan Walker." He laughed softly, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Guilty as charged." Mia's eyes widened. "But, you're the CEO of Walker Industries. The Ethan Walker everyone talks about." He nodded, still smiling. "And yet, when I was lying in the street, helpless and half-conscious, not one person stopped. Except you." She looked down shyly. "I didn't do anything special." He stepped closer. "To me, you did everything. You reminded me that kindness still exists, and that not everything in this world can be bought." Ethan reached into his desk drawer and handed her a white envelope. Curious, Mia opened it, and her breath caught. Inside was a check, with more zeros than she had ever seen in her life. "Mr. Walker, I can't take this," she exclaimed, trying to hand it back. Ethan raised a hand gently. "Please, listen. This isn't charity, Mia. It's gratitude. You saved my life, and no amount of money could ever truly repay that. But if you don't want the money, let me offer something else." She frowned slightly. "Something else?" He smiled. "A job." Mia blinked. "A job?" "Yes," Ethan said simply. "You're kind, brave, and honest, qualities that are hard to find in business these days. I could use someone like you in my company." Mia shook her head in disbelief. "But I don't have a degree. I've never worked in an office before. I make coffee for a living." Ethan chuckled. "Then you'll start by making coffee here, and learn everything else along the way. I started small once too." She stared at him, speechless. This had to be a dream. A billionaire offering her a job in his company. "Why me?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her sincerely. "Because you didn't see my wealth. You saw my humanity. And I trust people like you. For a moment, silence filled the office. The sound of city traffic below seemed distant, unreal. Mia finally smiled softly. Okay, I'll do it. Ethan's eyes lit up. Good. Welcome to Walker Industries, Mia. As she left the office that evening, walking through the marble halls, her reflection in the glass caught her eye. The same girl with a simple heart, stepping in knowingly into a world she had never dreamed of. She looked back once more. Ethan was still standing there, watching her with a smile that seemed to say, "This is only the beginning." And indeed, it was. Mia's hands trembled slightly as she signed the employment papers. The idea of working in a skyscraper filled with polished marble floors, confident employees, and the name Walker Industries embossed in gold still felt unreal. She had accepted Ethan's offer, hesitantly at first, but something inside her whispered that this was more than a job. It was a chance to rewrite her story. Her first day was both thrilling and terrifying. Everyone around her seemed so confident, walking in crisp suits, speaking in polished English, typing rapidly on sleek laptops. Mia, wearing her simple blouse and shoes she had polished herself, felt like a small drop in an ocean of sophistication. She was assigned as Ethan's assistant. That meant handling his calls, scheduling meetings, and sometimes serving him coffee. It sounded simple, but in the world of billionaires, even a cup of coffee carried weight. The first week was rough. She spilled coffee on a report during an important meeting. She addressed a client by the wrong name once, and when she accidentally pressed the wrong button on Ethan's intercom, her face turned as red as a tomato. But Ethan never raised his voice. Instead, he smiled gently and said, "Everyone starts somewhere, Mia. What matters is that you're trying." Those words stayed with her. Ethan often stopped by her desk, asking how she was settling in, or if she needed help understanding business reports. His tone was never condescending. It was warm, patient, encouraging. Slowly, Mia began to learn. She stayed after hours, watched tutorials on office etiquette, and practiced typing at night. Each morning, she arrived earlier than anyone else, determined not to waste the opportunities she'd been given. Weeks turned into months. Her confidence grew, and so did Ethan's admiration for her. The employees noticed the change too. The shy girl who once fumbled with paperwork was now calm and capable, the one everyone went to when they needed something done right. Ethan began trusting her with confidential files, and letting her sit in on executive meetings. Mia still couldn't afford designer clothes, but her quiet grace and sincerity made her shine in ways that no outfit could. But there was something else, something that neither of them dared to speak about. Every time their eyes met, in the elevator, across a conference room, or during late evenings when the office grew quiet, there was a spark. Unspoken, gentle, real. One evening, the sun had already dipped behind the skyline, leaving the office bathed in the golden glow of city lights. Most employees had gone home, but Mia was still there, typing a report with tired eyes. Ethan walked out of his office, loosening his tie slightly. He paused when he saw her still at her desk. "Mia," he said softly, "you never stop working, do you?" Startled, she looked up and smiled shyly. "I'm just trying to prove I deserve to be here." Ethan leaned against the edge of her desk, watching her with a look she couldn't quite define, admiration mixed with something deeper. "You already proved that," he said quietly, "the night you saved me." Mia looked down, her heart skipping a beat. "That night, I just did what anyone would do." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, most people would have walked past. You stayed. You cared." The silence between them grew heavier, filled with something warm and unspoken. Outside, rain began to fall softly against the windows, the same kind of rain from that night when their lives first crossed. Mia's fingers froze over the keyboard. She could feel his gaze on her, steady, kind, but different this time. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "You've changed everything, Mia. Not just my company, but me." Her breath caught. She wanted to say something, anything, but words refused to come. He smiled faintly, his eyes gentle. "You remind me of what really matters. Integrity, kindness, humanity. Things I lost somewhere along the way." For a moment, the world outside faded. It was just the two of them, a billionaire and a simple girl who had unknowingly touched his soul. Mia finally found her voice. I didn't mean to change anything, Ethan. I just wanted to help. And that, he said softly, is what makes you different. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, there was no wealth, no status, no difference. Just two hearts quietly recognizing something that neither of them had expected to find. The sound of thunder broke the moment, pulling them back to reality. Ethan straightened slightly, offering her a small smile. Go home, Mia. You've done enough for today. She nodded, gathering her things, but as she walked toward the elevator, she turned back one last time. Ethan was still standing there by her desk, watching her, the same way he had looked at her in the hospital that first morning. Something had changed between them. Something neither of them could name, yet both could feel. And as the elevator doors closed, Mia's heart whispered what her lips couldn't say. Maybe this was just the beginning of something far more beautiful than either of them had imagined. Months passed, and life at Walker Industries had completely changed for Mia. She was no longer the shy girl who used to fumble with coffee trays. She had become confident, capable, and respected. Her soft-spoken kindness had touched not just Ethan, but everyone around her. Yet, despite all her achievements, Mia remained humble. She still took the bus to work, greeted every guard and janitor with a smile, and brought homemade lunch even when the cafeteria offered expensive meals. That simplicity was what Ethan admired most. Then one day, an invitation arrived, the annual Walker Industries Charity Gala, one of the grandest events in the city. The who's who of the business world would be there. Politicians, celebrities, CEOs. It was a night of glamour, wealth, and powerful connections. When Mia read her name on the guest list, her heart nearly stopped. Why would Ethan invite someone like me? She thought. She considered declining, but Ethan's assistant insisted. Mr. Walker personally requested your presence. The night of the gala arrived. The city sparkled with golden lights, and the ballroom glowed with chandeliers that looked like floating stars. Expensive perfumes lingered in the air, and the sound of laughter mixed with the music of a live orchestra. Mia stood outside the venue, her heart pounding. She wore a simple, pastel-colored gown, elegant but modest. What she didn't know was that Ethan had secretly arranged for it, choosing it himself after asking her dress size from the office manager. When she stepped through the grand doors, every head turned. She looked radiant, not because of her gown, but because of the quiet grace she carried. And then, she saw him. Ethan, in a black tuxedo, stood across the hall. For a moment, the noise around them faded. His eyes softened when they met hers, and a smile curved on his lips, the kind that said you belong here. He walked toward her, each step slow and sure. When he reached her, he leaned closer and said with a warmth that made her heart flutter, "You look like the reason this night exists." Mia's cheeks flushed. "I'm not sure I belong here, Ethan. Everyone's looking at me like I don't fit in." He smiled. "You belong more than anyone, Mia. Tonight isn't about wealth. It's about worth, and no one has more of that than you." Throughout the evening, Ethan stayed by her side. He introduced her proudly to business partners and investors. "This is Mia," he said with pride shining in his eyes. "The person who reminded me what humanity really means." People smiled and nodded politely, but many looked curious, wondering who this simple girl was who had captured the attention of one of the most powerful men in the country. As the night went on, they shared light laughter, exchanged glances across the ballroom, and even danced once, slowly, under the chandelier's golden glow. But as the evening began to wind down, Ethan gestured for her to follow him. He led her outside, onto the terrace that overlooked the glittering skyline of the city. The cool breeze brushed against their faces as the sound of music drifted softly through the open doors. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was gentle, full of unspoken feelings. Then Ethan finally turned to her. "Mia," he said quietly, his eyes reflecting the city lights, "that night when you helped me, you didn't just save my life." She looked up at him, her heart racing. "You changed it," he continued. "You made me believe in kindness again, something I'd forgotten existed." Mia's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes shimmered in the moonlight. Ethan took a step closer. "You showed me what real worth is, not in money, but in heart. And now," his voice softened, "I can't imagine my life without you." The world seemed to pause. Mia felt tears well up in her eyes. Her mind flashed back to the night she'd found him lying in the rain. How she had nothing but her heart willing to help. And now, that single act had led her here, standing beside the man whose life she had unknowingly changed forever. She whispered, her voice trembling, "Ethan, I never thought someone like you would ever say something like that to someone like me." He smiled, gently taking her hand. "Someone like you? Mia, you're the reason I became someone better." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but this time, they were tears of joy. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Let's start a new life, together. No walls between us. Just honesty, kindness, and love." The city lights sparkled around them as he spoke. The music from the ballroom drifted faintly, blending with the sound of her heartbeat. Under the vast night sky, as the stars shimmered above, Mia smiled through her tears and whispered, "Yes, together." And in that moment, everything changed. The girl who once walked home in the rain with just $10 in her wallet now stood in the arms of the man she had saved, not as a stranger, not as an employee, but as someone who had found her destiny through a single act of kindness. Because sometimes, the smallest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And under that starlit sky, the poor girl who once had nothing found everything: love, purpose, and a life she never dared to dream of.
Sometimes, one small act of kindness can change everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a like, share it with someone who believes in destiny, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every week.